August 14, 1944, high above Rostow, Germany. At an altitude of 23,000 feet over Rostow, Germany, the pilot of a Messerschmitt Bf-109G noticed an alarming vibration through the control stick as airspeed climbed past 500 km per hour. For 3 years, Luftwaffe pilots had relied on a specific dive maneuver to evade Allied fighters. The maneuver exploited a limitation in the P-38 Lightning. Beyond certain speeds, the aircraft would become dangerously unstable, forcing pursuers to break off. On this particular day, however, the familiar safety of that tactic failed. The P-38 continued to follow and fire relentlessly. This moment marked the first operational encounter with a technological innovation that would render one of the Luftwaffe's most dependable escape techniques obsolete: electrically operated dive recovery flaps. These devices enabled American P-38 Lightnings to maintain control during dives that previously exceeded the aircraft's safe limits. What had been a carefully measured advantage, established through years of combat mathematics, was suddenly undermined by a small mechanical solution: simple flaps powered by electric motors. The origin of this breakthrough traced back to spring 1941, when Lockheed test pilot Aero Raw Major Signer A. Gilka encountered severe tail oscillations during a high-speed dive from 30,000 feet. At an indicated airspeed near 515 km (320 mph), the Lightning's nose pitched violently downward, approaching a near-vertical descent. This behavior occurred as airflow over the wing approached transonic speeds, producing shockwaves that moved the aerodynamic center of pressure rearward and caused uncontrollable nose-down pitching. To investigate, Lockheed engineers tested scale models in the Ames Laboratory wind tunnel operated by the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACO. The tests confirmed that shockwaves appeared along the leading edges as airflow neared the transonic regime. By 1942, German intelligence had obtained reports of the P-38's vulnerability through combat reports and prisoner interrogations. Luftwaffe pilots developed a countermeasure. When pursued by P-38 seconds, they would execute a partial splits maneuver and continue into a steep dive. Through 1942 and 1943, this tactic became standard doctrine for German single-seat fighters. Analysis of engagements in North Africa showed that pilots using the dive escape successfully evaded American Lightnings in the majority of cases. Often, German pilots would roll over and dive toward the clouds or the ground after attacking bomber formations, relying on both the aircraft's performance limits and the psychological effect on the pursuers. P-38 pilots hesitated, aware that their target could disappear into the dive at will, undermining morale across units operating in both the European and Mediterranean theaters. Unknown to the Luftwaffe, Lockheed engineers had been developing a solution since early 1943. By February, experimental dive recovery flaps had been tested successfully by Lockheed's test pilots. The mechanism was deceptively simple. Small V-shaped flaps, mounted outboard along the wing's underside, could deploy to shift the center of lift forward and restore elevator authority. Unlike conventional flaps, these devices were positioned near mid-chord and deployed rapidly within approximately 1.5 seconds to counter the destabilizing forces of high-speed dives. Kelly Johnson, the P-38's chief designer, had anticipated compressibility issues from the outset and consulted the nation's leading aerodynamicists. Initially, NACO had resisted conducting high-speed wind tunnel tests, citing concerns about damaging their facilities. This delay left Lockheed's pilots, including Tony LeVier and chief engineering test pilot Milo Burcham, to conduct the critical dive experiments. Alternating flights, they validated that the dive flaps restored pitch control, allowing the P-38 to sustain higher speeds without losing stability. Despite successful tests, deployment in combat faced an unexpected setback. Lockheed produced over 200 retrofit kits for the P-38 J-10LO and J-20LO aircraft already in Europe, but the shipment aboard the USAF transport AFC-54 was destroyed when a Royal. Nevertheless, the development of the dive recovery flaps ultimately transformed the tactical dynamics of aerial combat, neutralizing a maneuver that had been one of the Luftwaffe's most reliable means of evasion. In March 1944, a friendly fire accident destroyed a significant portion of newly produced P-38 components, setting back field modification efforts that had been months in the making. The timing was particularly unfortunate, as Lockheed test pilot Tony LeVier was midway through a 4-month tour visiting P-38 bases, a mission intended to bolster pilot morale and demonstrate new operational capabilities. Despite the loss of these critical kits, assembly and modification efforts continued without major interruption. At Lockheed's Burbank plant, P-38Js coming off the production line in spring 1944 were moved to open-air ramps, where technicians carried out modifications manually. It wasn't until June 1944 that dive recovery flaps were fully integrated into the assembly line, beginning with the last 210 aircraft of the P-38J series. While production gradually incorporated the flaps, LeVier continued his base tour, providing pilots with first-hand demonstrations of the aircraft's enhanced capabilities. LeVier flew a specially modified Lightning, known as Snafu Perman, which had been upgraded to the P-38J-25 LO standard at Lockheed's Modification Center near Belfast. At altitudes approaching 25,000 feet, he executed steep, high-speed dives that many 8th Air Force veterans considered suicidal. These maneuvers, including low-altitude rolls and abrupt pullouts, captured the attention of pilots and significantly boosted morale. His demonstrations at locations such as Kings Cliff illustrated the potential of the dive recovery flaps, showing that P-38 seconds could maintain control and pursue enemy fighters even during extreme dives. At the time, operational P-38 seconds in the European theater of operations were not yet fitted with these flaps. LeVier's objective was to familiarize pilots with the capabilities that would soon be introduced, giving them confidence that they could effectively engage German aircraft attempting to evade combat through steep dives. By August 1944, P-38J-25 LO aircraft equipped with factory-installed dive recovery flaps began arriving at combat units, immediately changing aerial combat dynamics. German pilots, previously accustomed to using steep dives to escape, were surprised to find American Lightnings capable of maintaining pursuit under conditions that had once been deemed impossible. The impact of the flaps on high-speed dives was starkly illustrated by the experiences of Robin Olds, a future American fighter ace. On an earlier P-38 model lacking dive recovery flaps, Olds suffered the effects of compressibility, a phenomenon in which airflow over the wings shifts the lift rearward, causing the aircraft to pitch uncontrollably in a dive. During one engagement, Olds dove to assist another aircraft and reached excessive speeds, losing control temporarily and causing his canopy window to shatter under high G-forces. Later, flying P-38Js equipped with dive recovery flaps, he noticed a profound improvement in handling during similar dives, with the flaps preventing the dangerous rearward shift of the center of lift. The dive recovery flaps were simple to operate. A switch on the control yoke activated electric motors that deployed the flaps in roughly 1.5 seconds, generating an immediate nose-up pitching force. Pilots were trained to extend the flaps before reaching critical Mach-related speeds, a precaution that eliminated the abrupt loss of control that had claimed numerous aircraft and lives. The sudden realization that P-38 seconds could now follow German fighters through steep dives represented a tactical shock to the Luftwaffe. For years, German pilots had relied on dive escapes as a near-foolproof survival tactic, but the new J-25 variant neutralized this advantage. German technical intelligence eventually examined wrecked P-38 seconds and discovered the dive recovery flap system. By that point, however, Germany's industrial capacity was rapidly collapsing. Persistent Allied bombing, material shortages, and production disruptions made it virtually impossible for German engineers to replicate or counter the innovation. As a result, the dive recovery flaps provided American pilots with a decisive advantage in the European skies during the final year of the war. The introduction of dive recovery flaps brought a profound shift in air combat operations over Europe. Data collected from various fighter units highlighted a substantial increase in the effectiveness of Allied missions. After August 1944, the rate at which German pilots successfully escaped using traditional dive tactics declined sharply until the P-38J-25 variant arrived in the European theater in the spring of that year. Before this modification, German aviators could often outmaneuver P-38 Lightnings with relative ease. Without dive recovery flaps, these American aircraft were vulnerable to the effects of compressibility during steep dives, making high-speed pursuits risky. A Luftwaffe pilot seeking to avoid engagement could initiate the first portion of a split-S maneuver and dive sharply, confident that a pursuing Lightning would hesitate to follow. The installation of dive recovery flaps eliminated this limitation. P-38 pilots were now capable of maintaining contact with enemy fighters through any evasive maneuver, fundamentally altering combat psychology. The dynamic shifted. Those who once hunted became vulnerable themselves, while former prey became relentless pursuers. By late 1943, a few hundred dive flap kits were prepared for field modification, providing P-38 seconds deployed in North Africa, Europe, and the Pacific with the ability to resist compressibility and expand their tactical repertoire. The modification effort also showcased the adaptability of American industry. At Lockheed's Burbank facility, technicians could retrofit existing aircraft with these flaps in just a few hours. Meanwhile, field units stationed in England were able to carry out installations in active theaters once replacement kits arrived through more secure channels following the loss of a C-54 shipment. Although testing had already confirmed the dive flap's ability to enhance aerial maneuvering, production delays of over a year meant that only the latter half of P-38 seconds built received the upgrade as part of the assembly line process. Nonetheless, the program offered valuable insights into transonic aerodynamics. It took engineers 17 months of investigation to fully understand the factors causing the Lightning's nose to drop in dives. The operational and test flight data gathered during this period laid the groundwork for principles that would later guide the development of supersonic aircraft. The success of the dive recovery flap program exemplified America's strength in rapidly diagnosing operational problems, creating solutions, and implementing them faster than adversaries could react. While German efforts often focused on revolutionary technologies such as jet propulsion, the U.S. prioritized incremental, immediately effective improvements that delivered tangible battlefield advantages. In the Pacific theater, the P-38 demonstrated its full potential. Engagements in the Pacific rarely exceeded altitudes of 20,000 feet, 6,080 meters, and pilots were largely spared the engine and cockpit complications that frequently affected European operations. Although compressibility was less problematic at these lower altitudes, dive recovery flaps still provided a significant tactical edge. They allowed Lightning pilots to pursue Japanese fighters through complex maneuvers without limitation, preserving the aircraft's dominance and contributing to its most notable successes during the war against Japan. Major Richard Bong, recognized as America's top ace with 40 confirmed aerial victories, flew exclusively in the Pacific theater piloting P-38 Lightnings. While the majority of his triumphs occurred before the aircraft received specialized modifications, the introduction of dive recovery flaps notably enhanced the P-38's already formidable combat performance against Japanese fighters. The dive recovery flaps represented an elegant solution to a challenging aerodynamic problem. Each flap, roughly 18 by 35 inches in size, was mounted on the underside of the wing just outside the engine nacelles. When engaged, these flaps disrupted airflow sufficiently to counteract the dangerous rearward shift of the aircraft's center of pressure during high-speed dives. This simple yet effective engineering adjustment allowed pilots to maintain control in situations that previously carried extreme risk. Troubleshooting the P-38's various performance issues delayed mass production, a challenge compounded by Kelly Johnson's meticulous work refining the design. By the time Japan struck Pearl Harbor, only 69 P-38 seconds had been delivered to the U.S. Army Air Forces. Nevertheless, the development of dive recovery flaps illustrated how the pressures of wartime could accelerate technological innovation and problem-solving in aviation. For the Luftwaffe, the removal of the enemy's vulnerability in high-speed dives forced a re-evaluation of tactics honed over 3 years of combat experience. German pilots, accustomed to relying on dive maneuvers as an escape strategy, now faced the P-38's concentrated firepower, including 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon in sustained engagements. The psychological impact was significant. Airmen who had considered diving maneuvers a reliable safeguard now found themselves exposed in situations they had once deemed safe. This erosion of confidence contributed to the Luftwaffe's declining operational effectiveness in the closing stages of the war. The documentation surrounding the dive recovery flap program was extensive and methodical. Every test flight, modification, and combat deployment was carefully recorded, generating a wealth of data on high-speed flight control that would influence aircraft design for decades. Despite these improvements, the P-38 continued to experience nose-dropping tendencies at extreme speeds, a problem only partially mitigated by the flaps installed under each wing in 1944. The dive recovery flaps allowed pilots to maintain control during steep dives, effectively reducing the risk of accidents caused by compressibility effects. Remarkably, the design was developed, tested, and deployed to combat units in just over a year, highlighting the flexibility and efficiency of American wartime industry. Unlike Germany's strained production capacity, Lockheed was able to adapt assembly lines and implement field modifications simultaneously, ensuring that operational units received upgraded aircraft with minimal delay. The operational impact was immediately apparent in combat. Prior to the introduction of dive recovery flaps, German fighters routinely escaped P-38 attacks during dives. After the modification was widely adopted, escape rates for enemy aircraft plummeted while P-38 kill ratios increased substantially. Many American pilots previously forced to abandon pursuit to avoid losing control were now able to continue attacks through complex maneuvers, significantly enhancing their combat effectiveness and survivability. The success of the P-38's dive recovery flaps also influenced subsequent aircraft development. Republic Aviation applied similar devices to late-production P-47 Thunderbolts, and the accumulated research contributed to a broader understanding of transonic flight behavior. These insights would later prove critical in the design of early jet fighters, establishing a direct link between World War II innovations and post-war aerospace advancement. In summary, the P-38 dive recovery flap program exemplified how technical ingenuity, rigorous testing, and industrial adaptability could converge to yield decisive advantages in aerial warfare. From conceptual design to operational deployment, the program demonstrated that even incremental aerodynamic improvements could produce significant strategic and tactical effects, reshaping the air combat environment in the Pacific and leaving a lasting legacy in aviation history. Post-war evaluations revealed that the program developing dive recovery flaps provided more critical insights into transonic flight control than any other single World War II initiative. Every pilot who tested these flaps contributed essential data toward understanding the complex behavior of aircraft at near-supersonic speeds. By the fall of 1944, modified P-38 Lightnings were being delivered to an increasing number of units, and their operational influence grew correspondingly. During support missions for Operation Market Garden in September 1944, the aircraft showcased their enhanced performance in large-scale air engagements over the Netherlands. Recognizing the need to counter Allied airborne assaults, the Luftwaffe deployed its remaining elite fighter units. In the ensuing dogfights, P-38 pilots discovered they could maintain pursuit of German aircraft through evasive maneuvers that would previously have allowed the enemy to escape, dramatically improving kill ratios compared to earlier months. Throughout the winter of 1944-1945, the dive recovery flaps continued to demonstrate their operational value. On January 1, 1945, during the Luftwaffe's final major offensive, Operation Bodenplatte, P-38 seconds intercepted German fighters attempting to flee after striking Allied airfields. German pilots, who had relied on steep dives to break contact with pursuers, found themselves unable to shake the P-38 seconds, whose new flap-assisted control allowed sustained pursuit through dives that should have ensured their escape. This unexpected capability played a significant role in the heavy losses suffered by the Luftwaffe, from which it never fully recovered. The knowledge gained from dive recovery flap testing also had a lasting impact on early jet fighter development. Engineers studying P-38 compressibility behavior applied those lessons to aircraft designed for routine operation at transonic speeds. When Chuck Yeager achieved the first supersonic flight in 1947, the Bell X-1 incorporated features derived from the P-38 research. The adjustable horizontal stabilizer that allowed Yeager to maintain control at transonic speeds was a direct evolution of principles discovered during dive recovery flap experimentation. The entire dive recovery flap program represented an investment of approximately $2.8 million in 1944. This expenditure is credited with preventing roughly 260 P-38 losses due to compressibility effects between August 1944 and May 1945, based on historical loss rates. Each aircraft saved equated to a replacement value of around $97,000, not including the invaluable experience of the pilots themselves. Moreover, the program's contribution to combat effectiveness through the destruction of additional enemy aircraft produced strategic returns far exceeding its cost. Integrating dive recovery flaps required comprehensive changes to P-38 pilot training. The Army Air Forces revised their instructional programs to include precise deployment techniques and high-speed dive recovery exercises. Pilots were trained to extend the flaps at 450 mph indicated airspeed, or at the first signs of buffeting, whichever occurred first. They were instructed to maintain flap deployment for at least 3 seconds before initiating recovery, minimizing the risk of structural damage caused by abrupt deceleration. Training programs for pilots proved crucial in mitigating risks associated with high-speed dives. Aviators who received instruction on operating dive recovery flaps encountered far fewer accidents related to compressibility than those flying earlier variants of the P-38. While the industrial capacity of Germany was increasingly strained, engineers there were still exploring potential solutions. Fowler-Wolf suggested adding spoilers to the wings of the 190D to mimic similar aerodynamic effects. Initial trials indicated potential, yet these modifications never advanced to mass production. Similarly, Messerschmitt investigated the use of variable incidence horizontal stabilizers on the Bf-109K. These tailplanes could be adjusted during flight to counteract the destabilizing influence of compressibility. Several prototypes were constructed and tested in early 1945. But the war's conclusion prevented these features from being deployed operationally. The Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter, which entered service in the summer of 1944, avoided dive-related compressibility issues entirely due to its swept wing design. However, with production totaling fewer than 1,400 units, the Me-262's introduction barely alleviated the tactical challenges faced by the thousands of conventional Luftwaffe fighters. A critical element of American success lay in the secrecy surrounding the dive recovery flap innovation. The modification was kept hidden until aircraft were actively deployed in combat, representing a significant intelligence advantage. Despite German espionage activities within US aviation facilities and neutral countries, the Germans were caught unaware. Operational security measures included enhanced confidentiality agreements for Lockheed personnel, separate and secure storage of technical drawings, and restricted access to information even among P-38 pilots until they were assigned aircraft with the new flaps. This strict secrecy amplified the tactical benefit by ensuring enemy forces faced the innovation without warning. The introduction of dive recovery flaps reshaped air combat dynamics. German pilots, long accustomed to relying on high-speed dives to escape engagements, could no longer depend on this maneuver. Conversely, American pilots gained confidence in pressing attacks, secure in the knowledge that opponents could not simply evade through steep dives. This shift in aerial strategy accelerated Luftwaffe losses at a moment when experienced pilots were irreplaceable. The cumulative effect of this advantage contributed significantly to Allied air dominance in the final months of the war, directly supporting ground operations that ultimately led to victory in Europe. Post-war assessments recognized the strategic importance of dive recovery flaps. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey identified the inability of German aircraft to execute dive escapes as one of the primary tactical factors behind Luftwaffe defeat. In interviews conducted decades later, German veterans consistently described encountering the P-38's enhanced diving performance as a jarring experience that forced pilots to adopt improvised and less effective strategies. Trained extensively in the use of dive maneuvers, they were suddenly confronted with the need to modify their combat techniques under pressure. Today, surviving P-38 aircraft equipped with original dive recovery flaps stand as tangible reminders of wartime ingenuity. Aviation museums display these planes with flaps exposed, offering visitors insight into how relatively minor technical adjustments could have wide-ranging operational consequences. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum preserves comprehensive archives, including wind tunnel test results, design notes, combat reports, production schematics, and field modification instructions, which remain an invaluable resource for both historians and aerospace engineers. The story of dive recovery flaps is frequently incorporated into aerospace engineering curricula and military instruction as an exemplary case of rapid problem-solving under extreme conditions. Students examine both the technical mechanics and organizational strategies that enabled swift innovation. Lessons emphasized include the necessity of precise problem definition, the advantage of straightforward solutions over complex alternatives, the strategic leverage gained through rapid implementation, and the profound impact that small design modifications can have on broader operational outcomes. Behind these technological advances were dedicated individuals whose commitment and expertise brought the concept of dive recovery flaps from theory to reality. Kelly Johnson devoted immense effort to fully comprehend and resolve the challenges of compressibility in high-speed flight. Tony LeVier placed himself in harm's way to validate that the proposed solution functioned under real conditions. Engineers such as Ward Beeman and Carl Hayden developed dependable systems while working under severe time constraints, demonstrating the critical role of design under pressure. Meanwhile, assembly line personnel adapted aircraft in outdoor conditions to keep production on schedule, and field maintenance teams fitted modification kits directly in combat zones. Each group played an essential role in a program that not only saved pilots' lives but also shortened the duration of the conflict. Lessons from the P-38 dive recovery flap program continue to influence modern fighter design. Contemporary aircraft utilize fly-by-wire technology to automatically adjust control surfaces, preserving stability at extreme velocities. These computerized systems now achieve what mechanical dive recovery flaps accomplished in the 1,940 seconds, underscoring a core principle that remains unchanged, preserving control when aerodynamic forces threaten to compromise it. Technological advances have transformed the materials and mechanisms from simple aluminum plates powered by electric motors to sophisticated composites and high-speed processors, but the underlying problem and its solution bear a striking resemblance to those early innovations. While the dive recovery flaps alone did not secure victory in the air, they removed the Luftwaffe's last consistently reliable defensive tactic at a moment of strategic significance. Combined with America's numerical advantage, enhanced pilot training programs, and critical fuel shortages for Germany, this modification significantly accelerated the decline of German air power. Timing proved to be pivotal. Had the flaps been deployed 6 months later, the introduction of German jet aircraft in sufficient numbers might have diminished Allied superiority. Instead, the intervention ensured that Allied air dominance persisted through the conflict's decisive concluding campaigns. The P-38 Dive Recovery Flap Initiative illustrates the effectiveness of wartime innovation. Success often arose not from radical breakthroughs, but from targeted, incremental solutions to pressing challenges. The program also highlighted the adaptability of American industry, demonstrating how rapid prototyping, flexible production lines, and immediate implementation could yield tactical advantages faster than adversaries could react. This approach to innovation would continue to shape U.S. military development throughout the Cold War and well beyond, establishing a model for combining engineering precision with industrial agility. The story of the P-38's dive recovery flaps confirms that even modest technical improvements can have profound consequences in warfare. Simple mechanical solutions transformed the P-38 from a fighter with serious limitations into a dominant combat aircraft. German pilots who had relied on steep diving maneuvers for 3 years as a means of escape suddenly found P-38 seconds following them into previously safe zones. The resulting psychological strain, combined with the tangible tactical disadvantage, hastened the Luftwaffe's deterioration at a critical juncture. Although the P-38's overall service record reflected mixed outcomes, much of this variation stemmed from how the aircraft was employed rather than from inherent design flaws. High-altitude engine problems were predominantly observed within the 8th Air Force, largely due to inadequate cooling systems in the G&H models. Subsequent P-38J and L variants demonstrated remarkable performance, operating effectively from bases in Italy and reaching targets throughout Germany at all altitudes. Ultimately, the dive recovery flaps addressed the last major deficiency in an otherwise highly capable fighter. They served as a testament to American industrial ingenuity, showing that the nation's aerospace capability extended beyond mass production into the realm of swift problem-solving and rapid deployment. This program exemplified how targeted engineering solutions, implemented quickly and efficiently, could decisively influence the outcome of aerial warfare. While Germany invested heavily in ambitious wonder weapons that largely remained on drawing boards or appeared only in limited numbers, the United States focused on practical innovations that had immediate battlefield impact. One of the clearest examples was the development of dive recovery flaps for the P-38 Lightning. From initial concepts sketched in Lockheed's design rooms to active deployment in European theaters, this program showcased key American strengths: methodical problem-solving, industrial adaptability, and rapid implementation. German pilots, accustomed to escaping from pursuing fighters by diving steeply, were unprepared for this simple yet transformative modification. The dive recovery flaps allowed P-38 seconds to maintain control at extreme speeds, turning what had once been a reliable German tactic into a fatal vulnerability. Within months, this small mechanical enhancement shifted the balance of aerial engagements, demonstrating that ingenuity and execution could rival sheer numbers and firepower in determining outcomes. The legacy of this innovation extends far beyond World War II. Modern fighter aircraft still incorporate design principles that enable stable control at high velocities, and aerospace engineers continue to draw inspiration from solutions that are elegant in their simplicity yet profound in their effect. The dive recovery flaps stand as a historical reminder. A carefully engineered, rapidly deployed solution can decisively alter the dynamics of combat, even against a technically capable adversary. For German aviators, the consequences were stark. Maneuvers that had previously guaranteed escape now became death traps. Aircraft that had been impossible to follow through a dive could suddenly pursue them with lethal precision. The once predatory American pilots became the hunters in a reversal that marked the skies over Europe permanently. Small aluminum panels, when placed in the right position, created the difference between survival and destruction, between tactical advantage and disadvantage. Ultimately, the story of the dive recovery flaps illustrates a timeless lesson in military technology. True power does not always lie in complexity or scale, but often in practical, intelligent solutions that can be conceived, tested, and deployed faster than an opponent can anticipate. By the time German forces recognized the shift, the P-38 seconds were already redefining aerial combat. What had once been a simple escape maneuver had become a path to annihilation, and the air superiority landscape of Europe was irreversibly changed.